So, I mean, this talk is going to be, really in regards to cybersecurity basics and ways to protect yourself. And in particular, we're going to focus on social media. Um, Kind of a little bit, quick introduction to myself. And to be honest with you, this is the part I like to keep the shortest because this really isn't about me. This is about how you can protect yourself. But I've spent some time, about 20, 25 years almost, in the field. Travel the world, and I love the opportunity to do mentoring or volunteering regarding the things that I've learned in ways that I can share things and kind of this goal of leaving the world in a better place than I got it. And I'm hoping that this evening I'll be able to make a small part of that as we go forward. Some of the cool things I've been able to do that I really wanted to share though is a few years ago, among things in cybersecurity and hacking, I was able to break into a train, totally on board. It was a sanctioned engagement that I was put on. But when I was your age, I always wanted a train set. And unfortunately, we didn't have the means in our family for me to have one. So when I grew up, I had the opportunity in this career to go and commandeer my own train and done some super exciting things around that, as well as developing some platforms and some ways that individuals can, just like yourself, can protect yourselves. But kind of getting to the point of all this, right? You know, the reason that we're here is because the world is changing. And if you look at how things have kind of morphed and taken place in 2020 with this pandemic, and I believe that this is the first pandemic that those that are on this call, on this video with me tonight, have ever been a part of. And it's not the first, but it has certainly had a lasting impact and it has changed our lives. And beginning of 2020, the lifestyle that I thought that I would have in 2020 has become far different. I imagined going, and hanging out with my friends and going to movies and sitting down and having dinner and just these normal day-to-day interactions that we used to be able to do. And unfortunately, all of that has changed. So, yeah, what has happened, especially in the pandemic, is that the world has evolved far faster than humans. Technology evolves quicker than we do. If you look past, look back over the last 10, 15 years, you can see very rapid acceleration in these innovations, such as having tablets that you can do video streaming and we can interact in real time or near real time. And as far as I've recalled back in history, us as humans, we've always had 10 fingers and 10 toes for the most part. And we've most of the time we've walked upright, and our decision making is relatively the same at its fundamental level. So as technology has evolved, it's provided some of these challenges to us that we really have to take a moment and truly understand. So let's start at the basics. Today we're talking about social media and how this impacts you. Before we get there, we have to understand how this works. So, we're looking at networks, and networks are groups, of computers that are connected for some goal. This evening, it's so that I can speak to you, since I can't get on an airplane and be there with you in person, which hopefully someday I'll actually get that opportunity. But networks are also used to do other things, such as, Facebook and Twitter, TikTok, and all of these different things that we engage in every single day of our lives. And I don't know if you all know this, but right now this video is being streamed underneath the ocean. There are roughly 300 underwater cables, fiber optics, that connect all of us together, and it keeps us all connected. And it's kind of what it looks like if you put it on a map. All of these little colors and these striations you see, these are these underwater cables that connect us at high speed. And things are changing. We're starting to introduce satellites, and cellular data is getting faster. And the other night I was able to stream a movie for the first time from my cell phone to my laptop in a super remote part of our country here in the United States. But this is kind of what this looks like, you know. So right now, we're actually talking and we're speaking over these cables that are under the water. And the amazing thing, you know, that I never thought that I would get to see when I started my career is that we would be streaming real time, in that we would be able to interact with each other in real time. And that you could put a question into a chat channel and I would be able to quickly respond back. And we could share this stuff back and forth, and we could talk about how we feel. And we can see how pandemics, you know, are negatively affecting the world around us and in other countries. But on another note, we can also share how we are positively impacting each other's lives as we move through this super weird, interesting time. To me, it's incredibly amazing, and I'm so thrilled that I'm able to be alive and part of this innovation as we move through. But let's talk about some definitions real quick before we get into the meat of it. I know that most of you probably already know these, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here, and I'll make sure that I get a copy over to you so you can review if you need. But antivirus software is basically the software that we try to use to stop bad things from happening. That's really the best way for me to put it. There are intended software applications that we install, and there are things that we want machines to do. But sometimes there are worms, viruses, malware, ransomware, freeware, all the different wares that we're kind of getting into these days. And AV, or antivirus software, is what we use to try to control that. So believe it or not, we're actually using a cipher right now. And basically it's a way of basically some of the building blocks of encryption. So we're turning a total stream of perfectly sensible information, and we're turning it into completely nonsensical information, so that if someone else was intercepting this transmission, they wouldn't be able to view it. So I think it's even more incredible that right now we're doing this over a totally encrypted stream, and it's going underneath underwater cables, and it's connecting to you in your homes, your apartments, wherever you are right now. Downloading things is pretty common these days. I think we're all doing it. I'm probably doing it in a ton of different places right now. I'm very careful with the words hacker. I consider myself to be one. I'm an ethical hacker. I use my intuition, and I use my desire to understand things as a way to pick things apart and have better knowledge, and to use that knowledge to solve problems in a positive way. There are evil hackers, just like there are good people and there are bad people. I typically refer to those as cyber criminals. And it's really not that different than a criminal that may break into a car, or a criminal that might steal something. You know, a criminal, regardless of what they do, is a criminal. So we'll refer to those criminals as it applies tonight as a cyber criminal. Private information is pretty easy to get your head around. This is going to be stuff that you don't want anyone else to know. So if you are, you know, you may not want everyone on the internet to, you know what your social security number is, or your equivalent. You may not want anyone to know when your birth date is, or who your parents are. So this is where we start to really dive into the real world stuff. And we're going to move out of sort of this academic. You know, viruses are small programs. They've been around a really long time. Worms have been around nearly as long, if not longer, than viruses. Trojan horses are we're going to get into very specific here in a few minutes. And Trojan horses can be anything from a game that you download for free, and you find out that the game is actually used to do something totally different. Spyware, we're seeing quite a bit of, and it's used to collect personal information, passwords, credentials, sensitive information, personal information. Adware used to be a lot worse than it is now, to be honest with you. Now it's just kind of turned into an annoyance. And then we're really seeing a great deal of ransomware attacks. And this is basically where everything is encrypted on your computer, and you have to pay a ransom to get that information back. And unfortunately, we're finding out in 2020 that copies of that data is being siphoned off and put somewhere else. Why this matters is because some of this data is very personal. It could be text messages or photos that you have, or conversations that you've had. But this is how this really works. Misconfigurations and Trojans end up causing situations like you see here. This is a live, this was a photo that was live into a nursery as of about an hour ago. We have sent out a message to the owner to let them know that this needs to be taken down. Unfortunately, they were not aware that this live video stream was taking place into the nursery in their home. This is another one. This is what I've come to find so far. This is an Airbnb. So the owners of the property set up cameras. This is one of many channels that were there. Again, this was live just a few days ago when I took this. This was directly connected to the internet. No passwords were required to get it. This is a photo of a living room. I chose this photo because the other photo actually had people that were in the photo or in the video, and they were moving around. And it seemed quite clear that they were unaware that this video was rolling. Unfortunately, we found another camera that it seems like the people that were there were unaware that it was in place. This camera is mounted, I would suspect, in a dome light. It looks down into the kitchen. This one was actually a laptop mobile device that we were able to pull back. We're not sure if it was a laptop or a mobile device because it came back as being Apple. But this was a live stream into a bedroom, and across the hall was a restroom and a shower. I chose this photo specifically because I didn't want to basically victimize anyone by showing that the live footage where the people are actually in it. The only photo that I decided that I would share was this one. This is a video, this is a photo, this is part of video that was streaming live. We've notified them at the IP, the owners of the IP address, that this was streaming. Individuals did not know, obviously, that they were on camera and they were watching television. So the point I'm trying to get across, right, is that you don't necessarily know what is recording you. You don't necessarily know what's turned on. If you go into places that you've not been before or they're untrusted, you're never certain that a video or some sort of device is not listening to you at this point. Again, that took me roughly 10-12 minutes to go through and find those still photos and reach out to the individuals that owned at least the IP addresses that they were connected to. That's a very, very short amount of time to invade someone's privacy and them not have a clue that that was taking place. So, the lesson of this, right, is you don't install software from untrusted sources. You don't install software that you don't need. I like to drive a point across, from time to time, and especially when I'm doing presentations, is that no software is free. Someone was paid to develop it. Someone was compensated, so that you can have it. And that is 95% of the time that you're going to find that, especially on mobile devices, there is an end goal in it. And it's either to get you to upgrade to a newer version or a larger, more feature-rich version of software, or it's to get you to pay. Or potentially the software is there to collect other information that lives on your device. So even applications that you can install from Google and Apple Store really need to have some sort of criticism around them. Every year I'll travel to Las Vegas in the United States, and we'll have a hacking conference where we build malicious mobile applications in a controlled testing environment. But we will see if Google or the Apple stores will allow those to be uploaded and put into the store. And the success has been rather high over the years. So I always tell people, Don't install things that you don't need to have on there. When you go to install applications and it asks if it can access your camera, or if it can access the microphone, or if it can access your contacts, you need to make very good, well thought out, deliberate decisions, especially if the application is going to use your camera or if it's going to use your microphone. Because you don't always know when it's going to be turned off. You don't always know when it's going to be active. In the United States, at least, we love to buy devices like the Alexa, and our phones have Hey Siri, that's turned on them, and we get these things, right? And you don't always know when they're listening, because for it to know to answer a question when you say, Hey Alexa, it has to be listening to begin with to know to answer that question. So just making very mindful decisions about how these things work. So this is where we get a little farther in, right? Social media data breaches account for 56% of the data breaches, and that was just in the first half of 2018. I can tell you very clearly, because I'm on the front line of it, that the amount of breaches that are taking place far surpass the numbers we've seen in previous years. And on top of that, what we're seeing as how credentials or data is being breached and leaked out of these data breaches, the reuse of that information is just rampant. So let's kind of talk about what that means. If you have an account on a social media website and you've got a photo and you've got your birth date and your full name, and you may have your address, and you have a password that you use, if that information is leaked, those bits of information can be reused on any other website or online service that you have. So for instance, if your username and your password for Twitter or Facebook or TikTok is the same as the one you use for your personal email, then that's going to be used and it's going to be reused. So not only is that one breach on that one website going to be used against you, but anywhere those credentials can be reused, say an email, the information that's in your email is going to be used as well. If it's the same credentials that you use to log into your mobile phone provider, those are going to be used as well. In 2020, we're seeing more breaches than we have ever seen in our lives. And we're talking about amounts that they're greater in just 2020 than many years combined together. So if we really look at this, right, 4.1 billion records were breached in the first 6 months of 2019. There are only 7.5 billion people in the world in 2018, which means that greater than half of the world's population was affected by a data breach. That means chances are, someone that's in this group that's on this video tonight, their information has been breached. And to put it in perspective, I give this presentation, or one very similar to it, about 30 times a year, and I've given it in 4 or 5 countries. I've never been in a room and been with an audience yet that someone in that room has not been a victim of it or is currently being victimized by a data breach and they don't know. But this is where it gets, where I told my children, I'd like to share with you as well. When I was your age, I was not on permanent record. If I went and did something stupid, we didn't have a video camera that was watching me do it. I didn't have friends that were live streaming, every dumb decision that I made straight out to the internet. I am from a different time. And to be honest with you, I don't know how I would manage my life if I were your age right now. It is so much harder to be, a teenager or a college student right now than it ever was for me. The information is coming at you faster. The decisions that you have to make are much quicker. The impact of those decisions come far quicker. And the most, minor infraction or the most minor thing that you may say will and can and could possibly be used against you. And some of these examples, there is an individual that he went home to Lebanon and he was hanging out with friends. He is a student at Harvard here in the United States. And unfortunately, the people that he was with made some statements that were completely inappropriate. I think it's the best way to put it. And when the students made these decisions, and when his friends made the decision to post those things, unfortunately, Ismail was brought into that group as well. When he came back to the United States to report to school, he was barred from entering the country. A single post that was written by a friend of Ismail's was a reason why Ismail was not allowed to come back into the United States to attend school. So unfortunately, this is one of many cases. There was a student also at Harvard. That seems like I'm picking on Harvard. Unintentional. Love Harvard. But there's a student that he submitted his application to go to Harvard, and it was approved. And he received a letter that he was welcome to, and was admitted to start his education there. Unfortunately, there were some photos and videos and some tweets that came up that he made about 2.5 years prior to him submitting his application. And he was making some rather stupid statements, which, if you're like me, you've probably said some things that in hindsight probably could have either not been said or could have been said a lot better. But unfortunately, with the way social media works, when he made that statement, it was permanent record. And when Harvard went back to do the background check on this individual, they rescinded his admission to attend Harvard. And he has since gone on to go to another school. But at the same time, he's had to address these statements he made when he was 16, through his life, because now anytime you look up, Harvard expulsions or Harvard, revoking admissions, his name comes up. Unfortunately, adults make stupid decisions too. I made enough dumb ones when I was a teenager, and when I was in college, I made some really stupid ones when I was an adult. And unfortunately, just to make sure that I want to make it clear that I'm not picking on a particular age bracket. We have a student that posted some really unprofessional photos and made some very unprofessional statements, and this teacher lost her job. And public records indicate that she has not been able to get another job teaching. Most of these photos and most of these statements were made in just a few nights period. So this wasn't kind of like a prolonged behavior. But again, one email, one tweet, one photo, one statement, unfortunately in the world we live in, can derail your plans. Unfortunately, in 2015, we also found the first social media data breach led to the first suicide on record. So the gentleman, the father, was on a website that honestly he probably should not have been on, and he made some very poor decisions in his life and what he was doing. Unfortunately, when that information was leaked and the data was dumped about this person and his family, this individual felt like it was just impossible and overcomable, and he committed suicide. Unfortunately, this has gotten worse. So this is in 2015. In 2020, we are now in the triple digits of students your age that are committing suicide based on cyberbullying or some sort of data leak that leaked information that they really didn't want to be known. So what I want to get across and what I've tried to keep impressing with my daughters as well is that you should understand that your social media accounts are likely to get breached. There is a far better chance that your information will be leaked than the chance that it won't. So as you decide to go and post things and share things online, understand that even if you send a message in private, there's a very, very good chance that that message will become public. And you need to be very careful about what you share. Additionally, if you're going to send messages to friends or to family members on social media or on any platform, you want to make sure that that is actually them that's on the other side. In 2020, with pandemics, we have seen the theft of identities to be higher than any other year before. And with the theft of data and with the leaking of data onto some of these platforms, we're finding that social media accounts are being created that look almost identical to the actual legitimate account. And these accounts are being used to victimize people. And unfortunately, some of these platforms are being used in a host of different things, such as extortion for sharing photos that someone has taken, or it's being used to do a host of things that go anywhere from ransomware to extortion to kidnapping to child exploitation. So understand first and foremost that anything you post to the internet, it's going to live there forever. That should be an assumption straight away. Even things such as Snapchat, even though the video is supposed to be deleted at a certain time, understand that that data is likely being backed up somewhere else, or possibly that data is being recorded or saved by someone else. And if that is taking place, there's a chance that it could come back to haunt you. So again, we've worked with students, I've counseled with students that were forced to change their plans because of something that was posted or something that they did years and years and years before on the internet. So here's some tips I want to give to you, right? Um, create a username and protect it. You don't have to share the username with everyone. And when you're setting up your profiles in social media, you want to make those as restrictive as possible from a privacy point of view, so that if someone wants to connect with you, you know, they're not going to be able to search for your name. And if that for some reason that search is enabled, you don't want them to see more information than you want someone like myself to see. So really go through and look at your privacy settings on your social media sites and make sure that information and the way to look at those accounts is as private as you can make it. Additionally, when you create passwords, I always opt to do passphrases instead. So instead of winter 2020 or fall 2021, you can do something such as I love Argentina, but we're changing some of the American vowels into numbers. So it's 1L0V344, RG3NTI1N4 exclamation mark. This password is going to be far more protective. This passphrase will be much harder to crack or guess if it comes to that situation. This is usually a touchy subject, especially when students. But I still have to go with the mainstay of do not share your password with anyone. If you're going to share it with a family member, make sure that the family member understands to keep that password very secure as well. Share some of the things that I've shared with you this evening about how to keep things safe. Because again, sometimes we're adding information and we're putting things on the internet that we don't quite know how they may be used against us in the future. As we talked about a minute ago, don't reuse the same password for all of the things that you're doing online. There are free password managers that you can get and you can use. 1Password, LastPass. There are a number of options. But the reason that you don't want to use that password again for every site is if one service is breached, the others are not. So you're kind of limiting the amount of information that will be leaked or could be used against you if there's a data breach. And a second thing is use two-factor authentication. And if you're not aware of what two-factor authentication is, effectively, you go to a website, social media, and you log in with your username and you enter your password. And then it may send a message to your cell phone, like I have here, that you have to confirm in order to proceed. That second factor of authentication makes it much harder for the evil versions of me to victimize you. If we have the username and password because of a breach, but we don't have your phone, or we don't have this other means of authentication, we won't be able to get access to that data. So again, super important. Two-factor authentication, there are platforms that are absolutely free. There are password managers that are absolutely free.